Hi, this is episode 80 of Crondos. I'm your host Jordan Hudgens. I'm a Ruby dev and the CTO of the DevCamp platform. I have a special treat for you today. One of my favorite parts of the show is interacting with viewers, and this guide will focus on answering a viewer question regarding strategies for approaching project development. The following is a letter I received from Christian, a developer from Germany. Christian says, I'm an avid viewer of Crondos and already learned a ton watching your videos. Thanks for your efforts. Starting with web development a year ago, I'm currently building my first own commercial project, a classified ad site using Rails. I really would like to hear your advice on how to approach building features on apps, as I have the following problems. I can't really plan a feature from start to end because I always think I'm missing something important. Next, procrastination and being afraid to make errors that will be costly to correct in the future. How do you approach building features when you don't know the scope exactly? What's your process? How do you get unstuck? Best regards, Christian. In reading this letter, each of the questions revolve around having a strategy for approaching project development. And in this guide, I'm going to walk through an answer for each question along with the problems that Christian brings up. Question 1 asks, how do you approach building features when you don't know the scope exactly? This is a great question. As helpful as it would be to have a clearly defined scope from the beginning of a project, it rarely, if ever, happens. And even if you're given a perfectly crafted project scope, it'd most likely change during some stage of the development, which would essentially render the scope pointless anyways. In the email, you said that you were building out a classified ad site, so we'll use that as an example case study throughout this guide. One of the statements made was that you don't feel comfortable planning features from start to end because you think you're missing something. This is a common issue when you approach an application build based on a set of requirements. You probably tried putting together a list of requirements, such as a user should be able to register, records can only be edited by the user that created the posting, etc. If you take this approach, it's natural to feel like you're missing a feature, especially if you're new to development. Instead of using requirements, I'd recommend creating user stories. I'll give you one from a classified ads app I built just last year. A user logs into the application. From there, she sees buttons for creating new posts or editing ones that she's created before. She only sees posts that she personally created, and she can't access this page without logging into the application. In addition to seeing her posts, she can click on a post to review all of the responses from users to that post. Notice how much more practical this is than simply listing off requirements? Your app should have dozens of user stories that contain all of the initial functionality that you want to build. Now that your app has a nice set of user stories, how detailed should they be? Honestly, I'd recommend that you keep the functionality as basic as possible. When I'm building an application, I don't even include all the parameters that I know I'll need later on. When it comes to approaching project development, I take a base case strategy. This means that I drill down a feature to its most basic component. Getting back to your classified ad app, let's say it has a story such as, when a user is on the page to create a new listing, she can add a title, a description, and up to 5 pictures. From there, she can click to save the post, which redirects her to the post show page. If you try to build that entire feature, it would be very intimidating. So my approach would be to first simply create a form page. From there, I'd only add the ability to create a post with a title. The description can be added easily in the future, therefore I don't really see any point in wasting time on it in the beginning. Also, I'd completely ignore the picture uploading functionality because that's going to require using tools such as nested attributes and different gems like carrier wave and different tools like that. So after a user has the ability to create a post with a title, I can circle back and add each one of the other components one at a time. Taking this approach makes the entire process much less intimidating. In the email, you mentioned being afraid that you're afraid of missing something important. This fear of the unknown is completely natural, and let me say, you will be missing something important. Creating user stories should help catch the critical items. However, I promise there's always going to be components that initially fall through the cracks. However, don't let that scare you off. You can add new features later on and it's not a problem. From my personal experience, I remember one time where I was building an enterprise application and completely forgot to give managers the ability to view posts they were supposed to approve. However, after I realized that I left out a key feature, I was able to add it in and the client was happy. So don't let the fear of missing a key item stop you from building. Remember the initial Facebook developer strategy, which said, move fast and break things. After becoming a public company, Facebook has moved away from this approach slightly. However, when it comes to building applications, it's still a strategy that I embrace and I recommend students to do as well. And I've discovered that it leads to getting more done. Additionally, moving fast and breaking things will help remedy your second problem. I greatly appreciate your candor, which is a huge reason why I dedicated a 1,500 plus word response instead of just pointing you to some other resources. In the email, you admit to struggling with procrastination. And I'm glad that you did, because procrastination is something that nearly every developer I've ever known, including myself, have to fight against. One of the top tools I use to battle procrastination is thinking small. We as developers naturally tend to push challenging features away. Instead, we like to focus on working with components that we're already comfortable with. That's natural for everyone, however, it's not good, and I have to remind myself of that fact almost daily. In his book, Deep Work, Cal Newport discusses how deep work, the type of work that takes someone from good to great, is not fun. In fact, when researching top performers, Newport found that 100% of the individuals, not 50, not 75, 100%, did not enjoy working on challenging tasks. So when it comes to approaching project development, please understand that the scariest features might be your greatest catalyst for improving as a programmer. So my personal recommendation is to embrace the difficult features, but take an incremental approach. For example, imagine that you're intimidated to build in the ability to let users upload multiple images per listing in your classified app. This feature can intimidate even experienced developers. You'll need to use nested attributes and incorporate a number of JavaScript elements to allow for dynamic behavior. This is a type of feature that could lead you to procrastinate, since it's a bit on the scary side. However, I recommend that you tackle the feature right away. You can write down a strategy for how you're going to build the component, such as integrate nested attributes for posts, build a JavaScript script that can dynamically create a new file upload element, hard code some image URLs in a sample record in the database, and then finally connect the system to the storage engine. That's just one example of how you could approach it. And then guess what? After you've done that, you're done. Notice how much less intimidating the feature seems when you break it down into smaller steps. This is a key to fighting procrastination. On to your question about getting unstuck. When it comes to development, there are a number of ways developers can get stuck. If you find yourself getting stuck on a bug, I highly recommend isolating the feature that isn't working. Too many times developers attempt to fix a component while still trying to keep the rest of the system functioning properly. When it comes to debugging, I throw best practices and form completely out the window. Everything is on the table when it comes to fixing a bug. For example, if data isn't showing properly on the page, put a database query in the view template. And I know, that's scary. It's the worst thing you could do, right? But don't worry, after you've discovered what the bug is, you can immediately go and refactor the code so it fits in with best practices. Other techniques I find very helpful when it comes to getting unstuck is to use the Rails console to run scripts and working with debugging tools such as Pry. These allow you to isolate the issue and focus on the problem instead of letting the rest of the application get in the way. Lastly, a key differentiator I've discovered between good and great developers is the way they look at application development. A good developer can look at a program or feature and start by listing out all the models, their attributes, and the relationships. And that's fine. But I've seen that great developers first focus on the messages they'll be sent from class to class. This is a completely different way to think about development. Instead of looking at classes like static object blueprints. It forces you to think about the actual behavior of the classes. This isn't an idea I came up with. The esteemed developer Sandy Metz describes the concept best when she said, "You don't send messages because you have objects. You have objects because you send messages." I hope that this has been a helpful guide for approaching project development. And thank you for your questions, Christian. And everyone watching the show, please feel free to message me with any questions that you have, and I'll do my best to help you out.